Hi, I will be presenting on sensory processing differences. The learning objectives are to explain how the nervous and sensory systems impact learning in schools, including social participation. The second learning objective is to apply sensory support strategies to facilitate learning for autistic students. So meet me. My name is Han. I use they, them pronouns. I am non-binary, autistic, ADHD, and a doctoral occupational therapy student. This is my service dog, Shep, and my partner, Laura. I am passionate about making environments more accessible and inclusive to autistic individuals. I am continuing to learn more about the diverse experiences and needs of the autistic population. The information that I am providing in this presentation is how I currently understand this topic. I am not an expert. However, I have had countless experiences as an autistic individual and have done a lot of research on the subject. I am here to share my knowledge and I am still learning. So first, a note on language. The majority of autistic population has asked to be referred to as autistic people instead of person with autism. Autism is not a deficit or disease. It is another neurotype and a way of being. Autistic brains are wired differently, and that's beautiful. We need diverse brains in the world. On the right is a neurogender flag, and the red, green, blue, and purple colors represent the rainbow or spectrum of gender identities and neurotypes. And the infinity sign represents neurodiversity. So first, I want to also highlight the difference between non-speaking and nonverbal. And since I am not a non-speaker, I am going to highlight two quotes from two non-speaking individuals. And I highly suggest you to go maybe read a book by an autistic non-speaker or go on to Neuroclastics and learn more by reading articles by non-speakers to understand more of their point of view and their experience because they have a lot to say. And it's really important to learn about all of the spectrum. And I think in the past, a lot of people have just listened to the autistic people that are speaking. And I am one of those people that can speak to communicate. And I want to make sure to highlight these voices because they are really important. And yeah. So the first quote is non-speaking doesn't mean I have no ideas or no way to communicate them. Non-speaking doesn't mean I can't learn to read or write like everyone else, but I can't if you don't teach me how. And calling me nonverbal is like saying I can't learn to read and write. This is by DJ. And the second quote is by Ben, and they say, I am fully capable of speech. I just can't let you know by verbalizing it out loud. Just because I need to use a letterboard or another form of alternative communication to share my words with the world does not at all imply I am not saying things worth hearing. So, all behavior is a form of communication. So, non speaking communication is 90% of communication. That is a lot, and only 3% are words. Non speaking communication can include, but are not limited to, gestures, facial expressions, letterboards, AAC devices, and body language. And all of these forms of communication are valid and should be respected. And then it's important to always presume competence. I'll explain a little bit more on the next page. So by this, I mean each individual can think, learn, and understand, even if they cannot communicate or provide evidence in a way that other individuals understand. So I found this great Instagram post, and they are linked at the bottom. But so, what does it mean to presume competence? So you can see believing everyone can learn, recognizing that everyone has unique capabilities um, and potential, seeing the strength in everyone, acknowledging that non-speaking does not mean not understanding, and respecting and honoring individual differences. And lastly, knowing that everyone has something to say, which is extremely crucial to presume confidence on all students that are being taught, or in all people. So here's the outline for this presentation. So we're going to start by discussing the nervous system. Then we will talk a little bit about sensory patterns before we talk about sensory systems, and then we'll go into sensory systems more in depth, and then touch back on sensory patterns again with some great case examples. And then lastly, we will end with sensory toolkit examples for the classroom and just in general. And I will be reading off a piece of paper that I printed out to help make sure that I say everything that I intended to say in this presentation. So first, we will do an environmental scan. So what do you hear? What do you see? What do you feel within your body? For example, how are your muscles feeling? Are they tense? Or how are your joints feeling? Are they achy? Or your tummy or your bladder? Does it feel empty or full? So let's take a minute to think about what's happening in our environment and how it's affecting our body. And if you want more time, you can pause the video and take more time to take in your environment. One big thing I noticed in my environment is all the lights that are on right now. They need to be able to be seen in this video. And the lights that I have on are very bright, and they are definitely affecting my ability to concentrate, and they're starting to give me a little bit of a headache. Also, my glasses with my noise canceling headphones are starting to hurt my head a little bit too. But I know that it's important to have my noise canceling headphones on when I'm presenting because I get very distracted by different noises. And I live in an apartment with people on the floor on top of me, and they will walk around. And if I hear them stepping around during my presentation, I will lose my train of thought. So I am accommodating myself for this presentation by using my noise canceling headphones, but sometimes they're hard with my glasses. So yeah, so let's go ahead and start. So the nervous system. The nervous system is composed of the brain, spinal cord, and complex nerve networks. The vagus nerve is part of your parasympathetic nervous system and controls your lungs, heart, liver, stomach, and intestines involuntarily. This means you do not have conscious control over your digestive system, the release of stress hormones, the calming of the body for conscious engagement in the environment. Oh, sorry, let me rephrase. This means you do not have conscious control over the digestive system, the release of stress hormones, and calming the body for conscious engagement in the environment through social communication. Therefore, the vagus nerve has a large unconscious impact on keeping your nervous system regulated to allow us to engage and learn socially. So the vagus nerve uses sensory input such as tactile, vestibular, auditory, visual, smell, taste, proprioceptive, interoceptive, and neuroceptive experiences to communicate between your body and your brain. If the brain is processing sensory input as threatening, the individual will become dysregulated, inhibiting their body's ability to learn and socially communicate according to the polyvagal theory. And in these pictures, this first one, you can see the vagus nerve as the body's master control switch. So it's showing how it's relating the spinal cord and your brain to a bunch of your major internal organs. Um, and this is also showing how sensory input is integrated into your central nervous system, and then back to the motor output with the peripheral nervous system. So just how they're all combined. And one thing that I really want to highlight is that this is unconscious. So what is vagal tone? So vagal tone tells us how well our vagus nerve is functioning. So higher vagal tone indicates that someone can self-regulate or recover from a stressful event faster. Vagal tone is measured by heart rate variability, the amount of time, which is the amount of time between heartbeats. This is an indicator of the vagal activity of the heart because the vagus nerve innervates the heart and controls the heart rate. And then vagal tone and respiratory sinus arrhythmia. So self-regulation can be examined through vagal tone by measuring the respiratory sinus arrhythmia, RSA. The ability to suppress the RSA indicates our ability to recover from a stressor. In other words, a higher vagal tone increases resiliency to a stressor and increases the ability to self-regulate. Research has found that autistic individuals do not suppress RSA well, or in other words, they have a lower vagal tone compared to their allistic peers. An allistic is a non-autistic person. This may impact their ability to access executive functioning, social communication, digest, um, process sensory input, and learn. As stated earlier, this is an unconscious trauma response, as you see in this diagram that I added in the slide. So I'm going to give a real world example of how vagal tone can be affected um, on regulation. So a parent is shopping with their autistic kid in Costco on a Saturday, and the child starts to experience sensory overwhelm due to bright lights, crowds, and noises. They cover their ears and become irritable. They are in fight or flight. They are in the fight or flight stage. The child then collapses to the floor into the fetal position. They are now up here and freeze, and their dorsal vagal is activated. The parent picks their child up and carries them out of the store to a less overstimulating environment. The parent provides deep pressure and co-regulation to help their child return to ventral vagal. So where you are socially engaged, connected, you feel safe, and you can work in the environment. In this example, this child did not have a high enough vagal tone to recover from a stressful event in that environment. And I want to emphasize that that environment is not built for the autistic person, and this is not putting blame on the autistic person. It is just stating that their nervous system cannot recover in an environment built like this. So they also did not have the correct sensory tools to support them in this environment. For example, noise canceling headphones, maybe some sunglasses. Um, yeah. And so the learning pyramid. So this is the learning pyramid flipped over to resemble how delicate the balance it is to be able to access higher level thinking and engagement. As you can see, tactile, interoception, and vestibular and proprioception sensory systems are at the bottom of the pyramid and are the foundation. Um, if an individual's needs are not met at a sensory level, they are unable to progress up this pyramid and to access learning and social communication, which social participation is right here at the top, and then next to learning and school success. So in recent studies, which I have the link down here if you want to look at the study. Participants, autistic participants reported how their sensory systems were affected in a school environment. So 88% of the autistic participants were affected by hearing, 75 by touch, 50% by vision, and 38 by smell sensory issues in the classroom. Participants reported that these sensory issues and sensory differences negatively affected their learning, with most participants stating it caused a reduction in concentration, which supports the learning pyramids. The learning pyramid. Yeah. I'll let you take a second to read it. It's water. Okay. So sensory systems. So there are 8 sensory systems as of right now. There is the visual, the auditory, the olfactory or smell, and then taste, tactile, or touch, vestibular, proprioception, and interoception. And we will discuss all of these. But first, we are going to talk about sensory patterns. So there are 4 different sensory patterns. And the first one that we will talk about is low registration. So an individual with low registration sensory pattern requires a lot of stimuli to fulfill their sensory needs. If you think of this person's sensory system as a large water glass that they need to fill for their sensory input to be regulating their nervous system. Let me say that one more time. If you think of this person's sensory system as a large water glass, they need a lot of water or sensory input to fill their cup to regulate their nervous system. This individual may appear sedentary and do not seek out the sensory input they need. They also might miss cues from their environment or their body and require additional support to complete tasks. And an example of a low registration person might be someone that needs a lot of input to be able to know when they have a full bladder. So they might not be able to notice like the signs that their bladder is starting to get full and they might need to go to the bathroom soon because their body isn't sending signals that they're registering. And so these kids might have more accidents because they aren't able to understand when their bladder's starting to fill up. And they might only be able to feel it when it's like an emergency and they need to go right away. Um, yeah. And then so sensation seeking is another sensory pattern that has a large glass of water. So individuals with a sensory seeking pattern require more sensory input than they are getting. Their water glass is huge and needs to be filled to regulate their nervous system. These individuals use active strategies to fill their cups, such as making noises or constantly touching things or frequently spinning or bouncing. So, using active strategies to fill up their cup and get their needs met. Whereas low registration uses more passive strategies to get their needs met. So, the next one is sensory sensitivity. An individual with a sensory sensitivity pattern will react to their environment. Since they have a small cup for sensory input, they require very little input to meet their needs. This may look like someone covering their ears, excess fidgeting or pacing, or showing signs of irritability. And then the last sensory pattern is sensation avoiding. So an individual with a sensory avoiding pattern will withdraw from the situation quickly in response to a stimuli. So in sensory sensitivity, they reacted. In this one, they withdraw. They notice and get overwhelmed by sensory stimuli very easily. These individuals may not like being touched. They might not like certain types of clothes or tags on their clothes. And they also might avoid certain textures of food or tastes of food. Um, so now let's talk about the different sensory systems. Just so you can see that occipital lobe. There you go. Okay, so first we'll start with the visual system. So the function of the visual system is to see and process what we see using both eyes together. One way that someone can be overstimulated, for example, is if a child is working on homework and has piles of random paper or things in their workplace. It can overwhelm their visual system and cause them to not be able to work in this area because there are just too many things visually. And then an example of a system that's understimulated would be a child may be having a hard time understanding or getting started on something because they need more visual input. For example, higher contrast of colors or more visual feedback to help them initiate and start the activity. So, some ways to alert the visual system are to, like I said just a second ago, is use bright and high contrast colors, prints and patterns, or use flashing toys or unexpected movements. And then some ways to calm or organize your visual system is low contrast colors that are soothing, getting rid of clutter, dim lights, and minimizing the environmental distractions. So in the pictures here, this one on the left has a lot of visuals within the classroom environment, a lot of different things on the walls throughout the classroom. This could be very visually overwhelming for some kids. This one on the right does not have a lot of visuals in it, and it has more calming colors, and it would be it would create a less visually overwhelming environment. And if some students need more visuals, then you can provide them with things like visual instructions or other forms of increased visual support, which we can talk more about later. And then the auditory system. So the function of this system is to process the intensity, quality, and direction of sound. So an auditory avoider is someone who gets easily overwhelmed by multiple noises occurring at once. And this may cause irritation, or physical pain. Um, this may cause them to have an emotional response, such as running out of the room, emotionally breaking down, or covering their ears, etc. Um, and then an auditory seeker may be someone who goes out into the environment to seek out noise. They might seek out multiple different noises, or they might seek out one certain noise. An example is like maybe a kid that loves to go to concerts, but it's like the concert of their choosing, and maybe it's one of their favorite artists, and they get to be fully immersed in that. And these are just examples. There are multiple ways that people can experience this, but these are just some common examples that I will be providing today. And some ways to alert the auditory system are louder background noise or music, toys with music or noise, and unexpected sounds. And then ways to calm or organize the auditory system are earplugs, noise canceling headphones, calming background noise, or quiet work environment. It just depends on the person's needs. And then you can pause this video to read this image that I got from the Well Balanced OT on Instagram. And now smell. So the function of this system is to process smells by discriminating, enhancing, and filtering out odors. So someone that is a seeker is someone who can tolerate a lot of different smells or one preferred smell. They might smell various things in their environment or enjoy candles or other scented things with strong smells. So for example, I like to seek smells, but I don't like when I like being able to control what smells I am seeking out. So for example, when I get home after a long, stressful day, I will turn on my diffuser and I'll put lavender in it to help me calm down after the long, stressful day. And it's just something that I seek that makes my system feel better, more calm. That could make someone else's system not feel good if they do not enjoy that smell, or they might not have enough control over the smell. And then someone that is a smell avoider might be someone who gets overwhelmed with strong smells or multiple smells occurring at once. They may cover their nose, run out of the area where the smell is, or become nauseous. And I will show an example. Well, actually, I took that example out. So an example of something that might, like a way to seek some smells within the classroom is by using scented markers. There aren't, especially like ones that aren't too smelly that like their neighbors could smell, but the individual could smell when they're using them, to increase motivation also to the activity. So yeah, that is the smell system. And now the taste system. The function of this system is to discriminate between safe versus harmful foods and detect different tastes. Also to highlight, all of the sensory systems are the main function for them is to keep us safe and alive. So all of these systems are working to keep us safe and alive. So some examples of someone that seeks out taste could be someone who might look for various different tastes. They may snack on various flavored foods. They also might need like stronger taste. So maybe this is a person that enjoys really spicy foods and they're like, I like 5 stars of spicy. Um, they're really seeking that extra flavor because maybe their body needs more input to be able to taste it. And a taste avoider is someone who gets overwhelmed by strong taste or a lot of different tastes being experienced at once. They may enjoy bland foods or familiar foods. Some autistic people like to call it safe foods, because we know like maybe if we're having a meltdown, like we know what a safe food we could have is when we recover from our meltdown or in our and need a snack, and our body's tired from all of that like energy that was just lost from that meltdown. Um, yeah. Um, a taste avoider also, they might be hypersensitive to certain tastes and try to avoid them. Yeah. A tactile system or touch. So the function of the system is to collect information from the skin about the size, shape, and texture of things being touched. So someone that seeks out touch is someone who takes in their environment by touching various textures. They may touch a lot of soft things or a variety of different textures. A tactile or touch avoider is someone who doesn't like touching various textures. They may prefer one texture and not enjoy others. They may become defensive to certain textures, such as tags on clothing, for example, or they also might have um, tactile defensiveness, which is when you can react to being touched, or um, yeah, there's more about that, but we can go into that a different PowerPoint. And then some ways to alert the tactile system are with hand fidgets, such as like stress balls or like tangles, like this one has texture on it that I really like, or a variety of different textures, lighter touch or unexpected touch or cold temperatures are all ways to alert the system. And some ways to calm the system are soft, uniform textures. This might include petting a dog or cat, or deep pressure, so like a really big hug, or warm temperatures or environments. So the vestibular system. So the vestibular system, the function of the system is to use the position and movement of the head in relation to gravity to detect the speed and direction of movements. So someone that seeks vestibular input, they may seek movement such as pacing, they may enjoy long car rides, biking, or running to help their body feel better, or to help their body to be able to learn and engage in an environment. In a vestibular avoider, um, they may avoid body movements. Movements may actually make them physically nauseous. So they may appear more sedentary. Um, and then ways to alert the vestibular system are using like a, a wobble like disc, um, or like a therapy ball, swinging, spinning, jumping, movement breaks, a suspended equipment such as you see in this picture right here with the ladder. And the ways to calm the vestibular system are slow, rhythmic, linear movements or grounded equipment. And proprioception. So this sensory system processes information from muscles and joints to understand where the body is in space. It provides feedback on the force and velocity needed to perform a task or action. So for example, it tells the body how much pressure is needed to color a picture or write. When learners are seeking proprioceptive input, it can be one of the most misunderstood behaviors, such as head banging, hitting, throwing, biting, crashing, scratching, pinching, etc. So when we help the student meet their proprioceptive needs, it can have a big input on their learning. As shown earlier in the learning pyramid, as you remember, the proprioception system helps your nervous system organize and be primed for learning because it's at the bottom of the pyramid and it's the foundation. So heavy work. Heavy work is used to activate the proprioceptive receptors. It is used to increase attention, decrease defensiveness and impulsivity, and help increase alertiveness of the body and mind. And then here are some examples. So there's carrying slash lifting. So for example, maybe a kid needs a movement break. Um, they could put on like a heavy backpack and go walk around, like do a lap through the school with their IA or something. Um, they could also use weighted items such as like a weighted vest that they can wear throughout the day or a weighted lap pad that they can put on their lap while they're working. They could also do pushing or pulling things. They could jump or bounce, for example, on a trampoline. Um, and then weight bearing things like wheelbarrow walks, crab walks. Those are great transition activities. For example, maybe they're coming in from recess and they're going into a classroom. Maybe the whole class could even just do wheelbarrow walks or crab walks back to the classroom. It benefits people, like all people. It doesn't just benefit people that have sensory processing differences. Um, Body compression or resistive toys, rolling, kneading, like Play-Doh. Um, yeah, and oral motor is great too. So like crunchy foods is a great way to help get that proprioceptive input. Also like blowing, so like blowing bubbles. Yeah, all great ideas. So the last sensory system is the interoception system. This is one of the more newly talked about systems, sorry. And the function of this system is so this sensory system perceives the body's internal state by receiving input from receptors in your internal organs. So as you can see in this picture, so such as your heart, lungs, bladder, stomach, and more. This input helps you know and feel what is going on inside your body to appropriately respond to it, such as knowing when to go to the bathroom. Part of this system is developing interoception awareness. Interoceptive awareness is the ability to be aware of your body's sensations and react to them accordingly. This is required to be able to access the ability to self-regulate. So how does compliance impact someone's ability to develop interoception awareness? For example, a student is fidgeting at their desk and rocking back and forth to help them maintain attention during a lesson. The teacher tells the student to sit still and stop fidgeting. The student complies to the teacher's request, which sends a message to the student that they need to ignore their body's needs and signals while in the classroom. They need to comply to the rules or they will get in trouble and made fun of by their peers. This example is teaching the student to ignore their body's needs in the moment to please the teacher and not get in trouble, teacher or adult. The fact is that people intuitively seek out things that make their body feel better and feel more comfortable, and avoid things that make their body feel uncomfortable, which helps people develop their self-regulation abilities. So people can use various ways to regulate their body. Some of these ways include, but are not limited to, flapping hands, pacing, wiggling in a chair, not providing eye contact, jumping, brushing hair. There are a lot of nerve endings in your hair, so brushing your hair is a great activity for regulation too, for some individuals. Um, Chewing, spinning, and lining up items. And for example, pacing, I've heard of pacing happening in classrooms. Um, if a kid is pacing, it would be great to even just ask them to pace in the back of the classroom where less kids can see them and get like distracted by them pacing. But then they're still able to stay in the environment and be able to continue to learn in that environment. Okay, so now we're going back to sensory patterns. So I'm showing this image again before we go over the case examples, and the case examples are next. So first case example, an autistic student enters a loud, crowded, and bright classroom. The teacher asks them to sit in a stationary chair and work on a task with a peer. They appear to lean on their desk with their head resting on their hand. They are not communicating with their peer or engaging in the task. Next, you observe them put their head on their desk and cover their eyes from the light. You notice, you touch them on the shoulder and they jump and slightly move away from you. How can we support this student with sensory tools? Is what we're trying to figure out. So, it is hard to know exactly what they need without more observations and a sensory profile assessment. For the purpose of this presentation, here are some ideas to provide sensory accommodations to the student. So, low registration. So, we could use a calming sticker, which is right here, um, to increase the control of their touch input in their environment. And maybe they just need a little bit more of that to be able to work on the task. Same with visual instructions. So sometimes it's hard for people to initiate tasks if they don't fully understand what they're doing. And providing visual instructions can be very helpful for autistic individuals. And maybe making them with more high contrast colors and things like that to help them initiate the task. And then sensation seeking, I put in a wobble chair and a stretchy band to go around the chair. So this provides the student with some additional sensory input, but they're still able to stay in their environment. They're able to stay in their own personal space, but still be able to have that extra input they need to be able to attend to a task. And then sensory sensitivity. So I added a light covering um, to help with the fluorescent lights. And this can be really helpful for someone to decrease headaches in a space and just to make it more accommodating to the individual. And then sensory avoiding. So I put personal space, please, because the child was getting touched when they were already, their nervous system was already activated. So that touch input really, they were trying to avoid that and they withdrew pretty fast when they were touched. Um, and then I put the noise canceling earmuffs in the middle because they could be beneficial if for either sensory patterns. Either if you're sensitive or if you're avoiding, noise canceling kind of a device is helpful for either one. Okay. And then next, we're going to do a personal case example from my own experience in school. So in class, I was instructed to work with my peers to read and answer questions about an article. The classroom environment was loud, bright, and the desks were close together. While I was trying to read, other peers were talking nearby. The fluorescent lights and the sun shining into the room were giving me a massive headache. I did not have the room to stim in my chair either. So stimming is like a self-regulatory mechanism. It's usually like a repetitive movement, or um, they can it can also be like a repetitive song on repeat. But in this particular example, I am talking about being able to just like be able to just rock something like this, or just a repetitive movement is what I'm talking about in this scenario. Um, so I eventually became overstimulated and I was not able to engage in this task. Um, so some of my sensory patterns in this scenario, I feel like sometimes my sensory patterns change depending on what's going on um, throughout my week or month, or what task I'm in or what environment. It can change a little bit. So what I noticed was first that I was avoiding or sensitive to noise, one of the two, because I knew that like I couldn't just run out of the classroom. I knew I had to sit there and like, yeah. Um, and then the other one, or sensation seeking, was tactile, proprioception, and vestibular. So seeking movement, um, and then sensitive. So I'm usually sensitive to taste and smell and visuals, but mostly in this example, it's mostly showing the visual sensitivity. Yeah, I just put in a little bit extra. So now my examples to help me with this example is, so for low registration, sometimes when I listen to a wordless playlist that just has beats, helps me overcome that autistic inertia to start a task. It also helps drown out some of like the words that other people are saying around me, because if I'm hearing words when I'm trying to read, it's really hard for me to process what I'm reading. So this is one tool that I could use. I also could use those earmuffs if I am just completely like avoiding noise in general. Um, but sometimes I feel like that earmuffs don't cancel out enough noise. Um, yeah. And then sensation seeking. So I would have loved to be using like this tangle where I can fidget with it, get some input, tactile input. Um, and then there's also that yoga ball right there where I could bounce up and down if I needed to, or like move back and forth with the wheels. So getting that input that my body was seeking to be able to attend to the task. And sensory sensitivity. Since I notice more visuals, I get visually overwhelmed and have a hard time discriminating all of the words on the page. Therefore, adding this blank paper allowed me to decrease the visual overwhelm, as you can see this yellow paper against the words. And lastly, sensory avoiding. So shading the windows and covering fluorescent lights to decrease headaches and just the amount of visual that my body is processing. Yeah. And then, so further information, you can talk to the occupational therapist or occupational therapy assistant, and you could ask them to do a sensory profile assessment, which is an individualized assessment to identify each student's specific sensory needs. This can be given to a student and an educator to access to assess both individual sensory needs. So this helps. So if you're better supported and you understand your own sensory profile, then have you're you're better regulated to be able to then also support their own sensory needs too. And this really happens with a connection with your student, or person that you're working with. Another way that an occupational therapist or an occupational therapy assistant can help is by doing a student observation. So the therapist can observe the student in their natural environment and make sensory specific suggestions that are individualized for that environment and for that individual. And these can be really helpful to improve engagement in the classroom. The sensory toolkit. So I have a couple slides of different sensory tools, and I will explain as you, yeah. So these are some small sensory tools that are quiet that can be used at a desk to increase focus and provide needed sensory input. So right now I'm using the one right behind my camera. I love wrapping it around my fingers. I get that pressure from it, which is proprioception. It really helps me focus. Now that I'm not reading off my paper, I'm able to use my tools more, and I feel already like it's easier for me to communicate my thoughts. I'd also like to highlight the Nido and the sensory putty. I love this sensory putty that is scented. It's a very calming smell. So if you're overwhelmed in class, you can be fidgeting with it. You can also smell it. It's great for your fine motor. So it could even help a student get ready for a handwriting exercise or a typing exercise, or just crafts and things, because you're working those fine motor muscles in preparation for the activities. And then also there is a Tango, which I've been talking about, which is also great. And I forget the name of these. They're like little snappy ones, which is also similar to a Tango, but a little different input. And then chewers too. Chewers are great. Or like once they're old enough and it's safe, like gum is great too. But yeah, to get that heavy work in chewing. So some weighted proprioceptive input strategies that are more passive are like a weighted animal or a weighted lap pad that they could put on their lap when they're working. It helps improve focus. Or this is a weighted vest. I've seen these work really well with kids, especially kids that might be, for lack of better words, impulsive. Um, it helps slow them down, kind of weighs down their body, um, helps improve focus, attention, enhances their body awareness. Yeah. And you can put different weights in them for different kids. And then some more proprioceptive and vestibular tools are, so the one above my head is this wobble disc or wobble chair. The wobble disc is right here that person is sitting on. I'm trying not to use gendered terms because especially in the autistic population, it's really important to use they, them, unless they tell you otherwise. So the cushion helps provide some of that different sensory input. It could be tactile because it has some of those pointy things on it. It could be vestibular and it could be proprioceptive input. Also, the band around the chair is great because you can stay in your own space, but you can still get that movement that you need. And also down here, the peanut ball is great. It can be used sitting at a desk. It could also be used during a movement break, and the kid could walk out on it on their hands and get more of weight bearing through their shoulders and their joints to help increase that participation and help them control their environment. So, for example, this research study found that stemming helps autistic individuals improve concentration and learning by providing control within their environment that is not built for them. So, the school environment really is not built for autistic kiddos. or autistic teachers or adults too. So using these tools can really help them control their environment and be able to access that learning that they deserve. And some interoception tools to help calm the nervous system. So I love these stickers. The stickers you could put on a water bottle, you could put on a computer, put on your desk. I love that they have some texture on them, so when you touch them, they might be a little bumpy. I bet you can also probably find some smooth ones too. Um, but so you can go through like breathing with them, like the star. So breathing out, breathing in, and going around the star. You can pause to read the other stickers, but they're great. Um, and then this visual is a very calming visual. You can choose different colors to make it calming to the individual. And then there's also this sensory maze where it has usually like a little bead in it that you can trace around the maze, which is also just a way to organize and calm your body. And then controlling the sensory environment. So this star projector, I know you can't do that within the whole classroom, but maybe if the funds are available, or maybe if you have a sensory room at your school, you could advocate for getting one of these in them. Um, but one way that you could do it is maybe have like a sensory tent, like a small little tent in the back of your classroom with this star projector inside of it. And maybe if a student's starting to get overwhelmed, starting to maybe get a little dysregulated, needs a break, but wants to still stay in the classroom so that they can still hear what's being talked about in class and not miss out on the education that they deserve to be receiving, um, they could go inside the tent and there could be a star projector and other tools to help them regulate. And it's a more controlled environment for them. There also might be these noise canceling headphones in that tent too that could help. Or they could just use them sitting at their desk. Maybe turn closed captionings on your screen so that they can read what's going on and still be able to tune out the noise. Um, and then there's also the light covers that I talked about earlier. And then also a desk with barriers around it to decrease visual overwhelm. And then here are some extra additional resources that you can look into in your free time. I highly suggest this podcast. I have learned a lot from Meg and who they bring onto their podcast. They are an autistic, not they are not autistic. They bring on autistic people, and they are an occupational therapist, is what I was trying to say. Yeah, and they do a lot of great advocacy work and neuroaffirming things. So they also do continuing education trainings that are online at your own pace. Um, I took one of them about strengths-based goals in schools, and it was very helpful. I highly suggest it. And Neuroclastics is run by um, well, they incorporate autistic voices and highlight autistic voices within their blog posts and articles that they post. And that's where I got the information about the non-speaker quotes that I used earlier. And then this YouTube, I don't want to mispronounce their name, but Neuro Wonderful is their handle on YouTube. And they are great. They are autistic and they advocate about autistic traits and characteristics and things. And then Kelly Mahler, she is great. She does a lot of work around interoception, one of the more complex sensory systems to understand. And I love that she uses blog posts, but also does YouTube videos to talk about things. She talks about toileting and like other things around interoception that are just really important to learn about. Um, and the Neurodivergent Affirming SLT has a great webpage on just neuroaffirming resources and things. And some book recommendations. I have read all these books and I love them. I'd like to highlight The Laziness Does Not Exist by Devin Price. I think a lot of people are sometimes misunderstood um, based on how their nervous system is. And sometimes when you're in freeze, it looks more like you're just being lazy, but really your body just can't move. You're stuck in that freeze. You need to be able to process those emotions and um, work through that cycle to be able to get out of that. And that's not laziness. Um, they also talk about how the structure of society impacts the individual and how to take into account the environment and how that impacts the individual instead of just saying the individual is like defective. Um, the person that wrote both Laziness Does Not Exist and Unmasking Autism is autistic and they have their PhD, and I really suggest their work. These other books are also great. Another one I wanted to highlight is How to Be the Love You Seek. I love how they talk about co-regulation and generational trauma and how that impacts your nervous system, and how even just your nervous system may already have some triggers or things from generational trauma that you aren't even aware of that are just in your blood. Um, not explaining that perfectly, but yeah, it's a great book that you should check out. The polyvagal theory is a very, I mean, it's a hard read, but it's a great book. And I definitely suggest it. And these are all audiobooks. Um, yeah, they're really great books. They really helped me a lot. And then here are my references. And here's my second page of references. And then here is my Google Doc link to my picture reference. And then I just wanted to say thank you for listening and I appreciate your time. I know that you all do not have a lot of extra time, and I just really appreciate you all taking the time to listen to my presentation. And yeah, have a great rest of your day.